So welcome everyone. So glad that you are here. We are here with some wonderful people today, some wonderful educators and future educators. And we are going to be talking today about what is EduCorps, and what is the vision? What are we here to support? And what is the long game, right? What are we here for? What is our end goal? What do we hope to achieve through supporting future educators? So our EduCorps hosts, and I'm sorry, Jackie, I didn't include you here, but I'm so glad you're here. We have Jennifer Silva Ayala, and she is currently a multiple subject credential student getting a bilingual authorization at SSU, graduated undergrad at SSU as well. We have Andre Beard, who is in the single subject credential program at SSU, also finished his undergrad in English, was in the subject matter English waiver program with me. So I had the pleasure of him being in my classes. We have Dr. Kelly Estrada, and she is here as CSU EduCorps Director, Professor and Chair in Curriculum Studies and Secondary Education. And I'm Dr. Teresa Burwell Stone, and I'm the EduCorps Faculty Lead, and I'm an Assistant Professor in the English Department in the English Education Waiver Program. Also joining us today, we have Joe Lofton, and he is here as a founder of MEXO, the Male Educators of Color Student Organization, which is filling a really important need on the SSU campus. And he's going to be sharing more with us a little bit later to talk about why he has started this group, why it's important, and how you can join. So I want to get us started with some conversation. This is a conversation before we started this recording that we already kind of dove into, because it's a really important topic, and thinking about why are we becoming educators? What brings us to this space? So I'd like us to think about the memories that make us. Okay, these are some questions to guide this our thought, and then what we share. What is one of our most memorable schooling moments? Why does it stand out to you? How might this relate to your interest in becoming an educator? And what was the lesson of this moment, right? As we start to study education more, we learn about the hidden curriculum, right? We learn about the things that just aren't in our content areas, such as, did we read Shakespeare or not? But we start to learn about the other lessons that we receive through schooling. So I'll start out, kind of give an example of a memory that has, really propelled me into wanting to be an educator. When I grew up in Pittsburgh in the East Bay in California. And growing up there, I'm actually second generation college going. My parents were first generation in their family. They both graduated from Long Beach State after transferring from community college. And so I was one of the more privileged students in a racially diverse and mostly working class city that was often demonized by the more white and slightly more well-off cities around it. I was in an honors after school program in 7th grade. We were working on some projects, senior students were here and there all around in different spaces. And, I turned something into one of the teachers. I still remember his name. His name was Mr. Porter. And he looked at it, and we were supposed to make a collage of some sort. And I, had my title page and all excited. And he looked at it and he said, "This one can't even spell collage. How is she going to go to college?" Like, she's not even going to go to college, because I'd misspelled college and collage. And, I was just kind of like struck by that judgment, right? That quick evaluation, something as simple as one letter interchanged for another, was enough to evaluate me as unfit for higher education, for the kind of work that would be considered dignified in this society in which so much work that is skilled is considered not skilled and really denigrated. Um, and so that's a memory that has really driven me into thinking about education deeply and wanting to engage with young people and be an educator. So I want to invite you all, maybe one or two of you might have a memory. You might have a positive memory. You might have one that was similar to mine, but there, it might be these memories that really like make us and push us into thinking about what can be different about education and schooling.
Yeah, I'll share if needed. Yeah. All right. I have a memory of high school. It's a little different than yours as far as the judgment goes, because I was the one placing the judgment. So it woke me up. I went to this school called Cardis for advanced. It's like an AP school. They give you different things. You can be marketing, advertisement, coding. They just do different things, but you have to take a separate bus to go to that school. So it's usually for people with A's and B's. I just got there because my counselor was like, "You're gonna have to do something to help you," and he was gonna give me more credits. Long story short, I'm there, and it's mainly students that are a lot richer than me. And this was a time, my senior year, things are falling apart. I don't really care about, the world. And my cousin just got out of prison. I think the next month he got shot, and I had just buried him January. So I kind of, and this was all before, at the start of my senior year, it was already, I didn't care about nothing. So it was spring semester starting, and the teacher, he's like, "You were so happy." There was one of my teachers. He's like, "You were so happy at the end, beginning of this year, and I can tell, things are just different. I talked to your father. He told me what was up. He told me the truth." And I was like, I kind of felt like vulnerable because I'm like, you asking questions, and then my dad is telling you all about my business. I was like, this is teaching me. Well, right now, reflecting back on it, how close, how much is too much information for a student teacher to ask, because there are like students in my class now that maybe I do want to reach in, and how much is too much information for me to know based on what they're going through, especially during a pandemic. But at the time, he was trying to get me to do my work, follow the rules, but I was a rebel. I was against it, and I was like, I don't care. Who cares about this assignment? And so I'm looking at this dude. He's older, living a nice house. I know he got the money. He's probably gonna retire in a couple of years. He's got the life set up. I ain't got no food in my house. Like I gotta walk home right now. I'm trying to like tell him my side of the story. Like you can't relate to me, so don't try to like motivate me with these fake motivational speeches. And he shut me down, and he was like, "I want you to see this video." And it was a video of this female. I think she was like 19. It shows a picture of her. She's beautiful. It shows a picture of her. Then it pans out to who's holding the picture, and you see her. She has like no fingers. She's bruised. It's just she was in a car accident, and some drunk driver hit her. And so her whole fight now is just to stand against drunk driving, basically. And she was like, she's fighting, she'd give anything to have your life. So what's your deal? And I was still, trying to pit it on him, like, you still don't get it, And then he was like, okay. He went, and this is where the tragedy. He got a picture, showed me it, and it was of his son. And his son looked 17, looked happy. And I'm like, why are you showing me this picture? This is going against what I'm trying to tell you, how you don't get me. And he told me, I don't, he looked, I'm like, he looked happy. I'm like, he looks happy in this picture, He like, yeah, I think he was, but I'll never know. He killed himself, and he didn't leave a note, so I'll never know why he did it. And so he's looking at me, and he's like, I see your father, and I'm just trying to make sure you're okay. And that's when it hit. You don't know what people go through, so it's just I look at that situation and I'm trying to look at my students and I see those same aha moments like, no, there's something bigger, like you just gotta stick it out. So that's what I learned how I was so narrow minded, rich versus poor, to where it was bigger than that.
Mm. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Andre. You know, you found that commonality, even despite, right, stark differences of experience, right, of wealth, of poverty, right? And yet there are things that still can bring us together, right? And I think that's a beautiful understanding, right? To hold these complexities together, right? And I think being a really powerful educator, we can do that. We can bring complex things and they can exist simultaneously, even when they seem to be in conflict, right? We might feel like we're going to be divided, um, but we can find ways to find solidarity or support with one another. Yeah, yeah, thank you. Wondering if there's one more story, one more moment that kind of brought brought us into this world of education. Or if
Got
not,
another story.
good.
No, I'm joking. I got plenty of stories though.
So do I. I think about these stories all the time. But I wanted to bring out this idea of stories, right? And lessons, right? School, so often we think about it as a place in which we learn content, and content that's supposed to unlock doors for us, right? Especially if we attended schools in places where most of our families were struggling, most of the community is struggling. And so we're supposed to learn all these things so we can have a better life and so that our families can have better lives, right? And so that our communities can have better lives and better futures. Um, and yet we're told in different ways sometimes that we are unfit for shaping our communities or bettering our life circumstances. And sometimes you're given a hand to say, I'm here for you. And I know you're struggling. And I know that we can together, right? I know that together we can make different futures. Um, so moving from that thought, I'd like us to think a little bit more about schooling. And Andre, you were talking about this, like, you were like, I wasn't trying to follow the rules, I wasn't trying to like check off my assignment chart. I wasn't trying to do all that. I had bigger things on my mind, right? And so often schooling is positioned in such a way in relationship to our identities, in relationship to our lived experiences, that there are reasons that we don't trust the rules of school, right? There are reasons that we don't trust that following the rules will really enable us to live better lives, right? We have seen historically and again repeatedly in this past summer, right, the ways that even making the right choices, even not doing anything wrong, right, Black men in particular, Black transgender people, Black women, Native peoples are also high on this list. Um, Other brown peoples are also high on this list, especially in California, right? Thinking about where Sonoma State is located, think about Andy Lopez. There is a history of no matter what the choices we make, right? One little thing can mean that we deserved an unfair death, right? And so we tend to think about schooling as this place as, okay, well, I know that that can lead to good futures for some people, but is that a place that can lead to good futures for me, and the way that I look and the way that people see me when I walk in a room? So I'd like to think a little bit about the histories of schooling. What have been its purposes? Or who has schooling been for and who has schooling not been for? I'm open for what are some different ways that schooling has existed historically.
I can go a little bit. Just touching off my personal experiences, speaking my own personal truth.
Mhm.
Um, there's a lot of reasons why I don't trust, or I do like love the idea of schooling, but I don't trust our system, like current schooling system. And a lot of that has to do with like my correlation to like not being a black man, not being able to trust the police. Um, and a lot of that has to do with like the historical origins of both entities, because police, before they were police, there were slave captures. That wasn't, the term wasn't police
Overseers.
officers or sheriff. you know
Mhm.
their their sole priority was to capture slaves and to return them back to their owners.
Mhm.
um, so then again, seeing that same dynamic parallel to like schooling and being that at the beginning of time, in the origins like 1700, pretty sure like men were the white men who own land were the only people eligible to go to schooling, and then open the doors for women eventually. But then you still see like later on in the civil rights movement, the whole segregation era, and that white students in particularly higher, more upper class areas have higher quality educators, have higher quality resources. And we see how that disproportionately affects into the black community, where they have lack of resources, they're underserved, and they don't have the necessary funding to produce to produce substantial amount of resources for their students to be able to invest in and to help get their foot in the doors into later opportunities, whether that be college, job, or certain other type of line of work or a trade. Um, but there's a lot of reasons why, like me personally, I don't trust schooling, and that has to do with just the historic origins and the intentions of like why schooling was designed and why it put people of white people of power in positions of privilege over black people. And a lot of that has to correlate with the origins of where we come from as a country. And it's just gotta we gotta get that sweeping stuff under the radar, sweeping under the rug, and kind of just continuing to create that conversation like we are now about it, and like to address that elephant in the room because it's there, everyone sees it. So why not talk about it, address it, and be able to grow from it and have a conversation and learn from it. So I think that's one of the important things, that we're having conversations about it now. So
Definitely, definitely. And I think that what you talk about, right? There's the potential of schooling, right? There's potential of education, right? Which is why people who were enslaved were denied an education, right? Because education can be liberatory, but at the same time, schooling can also be and has been, right, a colonial socializing, whitewashing space, right? When we talk about the origins of the country, right, we have to think about the ways that residential schools were used and purposely instituted to destroy native communities, right? So it was used in order to take away culture, take away language, take away community connections and knowledges, right? And to say that all of those were not worthy, right? That those are not okay, and really to destroy them. And that was the purpose. And right now we see such a beautiful and necessary resurgence where so many languages and so many knowledges and so many cultural practices are being revitalized in Native communities. And that's such an important part of understanding schooling and understanding our role as educators and what we bring, right? Because the community education, the community knowledges, as they have existed outside of schooling because they've had to, or because that's where they existed traditionally, are beautiful and they connect us, right? They connect us to the past, they connect us to the future, and they connect us to one another in ways where we can see our power and we can see the collectivity and the ways that um, we can not only survive but thrive. And we see so much of that also paralleled in Black freedom movements, right? And in Latinx freedom movements, right? Where there's education for liberation, right? There's education to restore. there's education to say Black is beautiful, right? To say that Black lives matter, right? And there's education to say that our languages matter and that we deserve to hold on to and cherish our languages, the languages that we learn in our homes with our families, and that we deserve to understand the histories that have brought us here for many of us, right? For many of us, the journeys of our families here are journeys that have been shaped by US imperialism, right? And so we come to the US in these positions that are so tenuous, right? These positions in which we're always worried about our family's safety, right? And we're worried about our family back home. And for my family, this happened a number of generations ago. And so there was a cut of those ties, right? And yet, then what does it mean then to be pushed into the American project? And schooling does that work, right? Schooling tells us, okay, well, you can become American, right? You can move into this space of being a citizen, right? Both in a legal sense that is protective in some cases, although not all, right? There are histories of deportations, repatriations that have removed citizens, right? That go back to the 1930s and also have occurred more recently. There are the protections, but there's also kind of the belonging, right? And which ways are we asked to belong that denigrate other groups? And which ways are belonging to the American project based in anti-Blackness and based in Native erasure? And so these are really important questions that people are asking in Chicano, in Puerto Rican, which has its own really like incredible colonial history with the US, right, as a protectorate when there's no vote, right? So there are all these different ways that schooling and education in the futures that we are part of and thinking about hinge on this distinction between what is schooling that is socializing us in negative ways and what is the schooling and education that's liberatory and brings out possibilities where we can find and love ourselves and love one another. So I just talked a lot right now, but I wanted to hear a little bit more from you. How do the various histories, some of the ones that Joe talked about, some of the ones that I talked about, how do our knowledge of those histories inform our desires and interests in becoming educators, right? How did those shape why we're here? And I want to open that up to you. And maybe Jennifer, I haven't heard from you yet, but I would love to if you would like to think about that. How do those knowledges inform how you see being a teacher?
So for me, it was more that my language, my Spanish language, was never valued in school. And the irony of it is that I was in a Spanish immersion program where they were supposed to talk to me in Spanish and talk to me in English, and I was going to learn. But the majority of instruction was in English. The majority of my teachers only spoke English. So how was Spanish ever going to be included in the classroom? So they were just using it as a bridge to make me learn English. Like, I feel like a lot of my teachers weren't taking the time to like really know me, to know my language, to know my culture. They were just trying to like, okay, you're going to learn in English and this is what it is. And even like through school, like the history that I was learning, it was just from a white point of view. This is how the US was created. And it was like all the nice little things. And then when I got to college, I had to pay to learn about my culture. So I was taking Spanish classes, and then I was like, okay, 20 years later, I am learning about my Mexican culture. I am learning all these things that were kind of like, for me, when I was hearing them, it was like, wow, really? Like, did this really happen? This was not what I was taught. And they'd be like, yeah, this really happened. And I'm like, no, it didn't. And they're like, yes, it did. And it was just more like those shocking moments. And I would come home and be like, Dad, Mom, guess what I learned? And they're like, yeah, that happened. And I'm like, so why am I learning about this now? Like 20 years later, why am I learning to value my culture, to value my language, something that was never happening in the early years of my life. So
Mm.
that was for me, I feel like that was for me the moment where I was like, okay, I want to be a teacher and I want to make these kids feel happy that they speak Spanish, feel happy from where they come from, who they are, because that was not happening for me. So that was more like my motivation of being like connecting, having that bond with my students, making them feel like I'm here to represent you and I'm here to help you.
Yes.
Amen.
Yeah. I feel a lot of like joy and passion and determination and so much knowledge, right? That's kept from us, right? We go back to thinking about like schooling as content, right? But what is the content? And how does that make us relate to ourselves and to our communities? Um, if the content is not helping us love ourselves and not helping us love and support and want to be from our communities, right? Like, what is the idea of you always have to leave your community and go somewhere else to become better, right? Like, we have work to do in our own communities, and being part of the people that we come from and the places that we grow up is really essential to, I think, the work of critical education, right? Of being a teacher that's saying, you don't need to leave to be worthy, you already are.
Vanessa, would you mind if I add to the conversation?
I would love for you to add to it, please.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So just to offer a different perspective from the ones that have been offered by Andre and Jennifer and Joe, my childhood experience of schooling was actually very community-based, very local. I went to Catholic school for grades 1 through 8, and it was one class per grade, and most of the teachers were nuns. And this was also the church where my Hispanic family, my Latinx family went to church, and we did, every once in a while, my mom would do donuts in the hall because everybody came and had coffee and donuts after church. And, it was a very community-based experience. And my family was working class. My dad was an alcoholic. My parents experienced duress during my childhood because there were 7 of us and we were struggling. So for me, school was a place of love, safety, belongingness. It was definitely defined by the colonialist and religious mindset that's dominant in public institutions, both and private institutions of schooling. But within the context of the classroom, oftentimes over that course of my life, grades 1 through 8, that teacher, either a lay person or a nun, was the primary person to love, comfort, care, and value me as a person. I was the oldest of 7 kids. I was charged with being responsible for taking care of them at a very early age, and burdened by that responsibility because I had to be the responsible person at school. I got to be the person of focus, of need, and it was just me, not all my brothers and sisters, that had to be accounted for like it was in the home when I went home. So I attribute my success in life as a working class person whose family experienced divorce when I was 13 and went into subsequent dire poverty and struggled all of my adolescent years through that. I attributed my current success to the consistent love, caring, comfort, and valuing. Like I say, the class size was small. So all these other variables, of course, factor in. And the ideological stance that nuns embodied was one of caring and love and focus, etc. That was kind of the vocation that they were called to. But as a child and as now an adult looking back, what I experienced was something that laid the foundation for success for the rest of my life, because I knew that I was important, and that I had potential, that someone believed in me. And for many, many kids, and I would hazard a guess that all of us could say that there were teachers like that in your past, maybe not consistently, but from year to year, whether or not it was a small school, a big school, public, private, who were those people for you and who made you feel like you had that potential to succeed, and actually were sometimes the wind under your wings and how you got here. So I'm just trying to provide that as a contrast to, the sometimes injurious schooling experiences that we have from, these institutions and these institutional agents who embody these aggressive and disruptive practices towards, non-mainstream folk.
Yeah.
Just as a contrast.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. And I think that contrast is so important, right? Because it gets at, despite everything we know about schools and how they operate systematically, we still have these wonderful people and wonderful spaces and wonderful moments, right, that can support us and propel us into futures that are rewarding, right? Into futures where we feel valued, and into spaces where we do build and support our communities, right? And this is so lovely. And this is where I'd really like us to kind of think about, what is EduCorps, and what is our purpose at Sonoma State? What are we doing here? Who do we aim to support? And to what ends? And so, EduCorps is a program in which we are wanting to increase the number of future teachers who are coming from backgrounds who are historically not represented in the teaching profession. And importantly, those teachers who want to best serve our communities, the communities that historically have not been best served by schooling as a whole, right? So we want teachers who are going to support migrant and immigrant communities. We want teachers who are going to support Black communities. We want teachers who are going to support Asian Pacific Islander communities, right? We're thinking right now about a lot of the violence that's taking place there, and a lot of the ways that there's this pitting of our communities against one another, in the ways that the people are responding to this violence against Asian elders. But we have to think about, how do we build solidarity instead, right? How do we look at the community responses to that violence, in which there are people who are there to protect the elders and to say, no, these problems are systematic. There are reasons that people are acting out with violence, because there's the violence is already there. Poverty is violence. Not having access to healthcare and housing in a raging global pandemic is violence, right? Having so many people cut off from jobs, cut off from family and support, and letting this sickness rage on, that is violence. And so when we think about, how do we respond to these moments, we're really trying to think about an educational space where we can see those connections, where we can see those bigger and deeper structures in which we act and respond to one another. We're thinking about Native communities, and how do we, those of us who are not Native American or Indigenous, how do we come to understand the places in which we live and educate? How do we best support our Native students and understandings of sovereignty, right? Understandings of land back. What does that mean? Because what does that mean when we've ended up in a place because of imperialism, right? Because of kidnapping and enslavement. But now we're here, and what does that mean? How do we learn what it means to occupy this place? How do we enter into community and hear that many Native groups, and I'm thinking specifically about the Lisan Oloni, on whose land I'm currently occupying, we're saying, well, you all need to learn how to become good guests, because you haven't been. You've been bad guests. You have not been guests, right? You have been colonizers, settlers, and occupiers. And what does that mean to all of us, right? What does it mean to support Black liberation? What does it mean to say in our hearts and to be able to say in classrooms and stand up and say, no, we have to talk about Black Lives Matter in the classroom. And we have to engage in practices that seriously understand why we have to be in alignment with movements that are really about basic dignities. And that if Black people's dignities, right, if migrant people's dignities, if Native people's sovereignties are in place, everyone else is taken care of, right? Because of the hierarchies that are meant to separate us and that are meant to keep us from coming together and really being in solidarity, right? And how do we think about how these different movements and desires for different futures sometimes come into conflict? And how do we work those out? How do we understand one another's struggles enough in order to support them and realign what our liberated futures look like, so that they're not infringing upon other people's sovereignty and other people's liberation? And how do we understand the ways that gender is constructed as a colonial construct, right? What does that mean for our classroom? What does that mean for us, right? If we are queer educators, you know, there's, as far as I remember being in secondary schools, like not that many educators were out, right? And there's, you know, like this kind of like push to heteroconformity. And how do we understand that? How do we best support our LGBTQI students, right? And be in solidarity with staff members, right? And ourselves. How do we think about the ways that neurotypicality and ableism has really shaped the ways that schooling operates, right? What does it mean to move differently, to consider time and labor differently, and to understand that we have different abilities, and that's good, right? That is a good thing. You know, and not trying to put everyone into an able-bodied little box, right? When so many of us don't fit there. And so there are so many different ways. And so what I wanted to really say here is EduCorps is here to support future educators. And some of the things, it's kind of like, how do I apply? You know, what are the tests that I need to take? How do I get pre-service hours in schools? You know, there are a lot of things that are kind of like a mystery. What's multiple subject? What does that mean? What's single subject? How do I work with disabled students? What's a special education credential? What is a bilingual authorization, right? There are all these little things that we need to just know, the nuts and bolts, like these are the different things we need to do so we can be in classrooms with children and youth. But EduCorps is also here to really think about how do we support ourselves and one another so that we can be our full selves, right? So as Kelly talked about, so that we can feel loved, right? How can we work together to build collectives in schools where we are supporting one another and engaging in culturally sustaining and revitalizing education? How do we work with other teachers who are already there? How do we come in with other new teachers and say, you know, this is the curriculum we want to do in ninth grade science, and we want to draw upon Indigenous epistemologies and understandings of fire science, and you know, like how to heal this region, right? How do we understand those things and draw upon knowledges that are often excluded from textbooks, and even like the education that we get. So those are the things we want to create spaces where we can talk about that, right? Where we can point one another to resources, where we can learn from one another. And so that is the vision of EduCorps as it is developing. It's in process. We're still really trying to think about what that means. We're trying to learn from one another, and think about, where are the places where we'll be going to teach and what matters there? What matters to the communities where you're going to be a part of? What are the issues there? Because it might look different from where you grew up, and it might look different from where we are right now. So how do we really learn and work in community instead of enter in and leave, at the end of the day? So I'm really excited about this work. I'm really excited about where it's going. And so what I would like to do right now is make sure that we also hear about another organization that is here to really support this work. What does it mean to be a male educator of color, right? Especially at the elementary level, there are not that many. There are not that many men of color. And so how do we find and create space? So I'm going to invite Joe now to talk about that and the organization that he's created to really build support. So please.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Is it cool if I share my screen?
Yes,
Um,
definitely. Let me set that
a
up.
quick
Make sure that
presentation.
you
Yeah, Dr. Estrada has already seen it, so Dr. E, bear with us, but second time's the charm, so. All righty.
All right, I just need
Awesome.
you to
Thank
co-host. I
you.
think you should be able to share.
Cool. Okay. Bing. Pull this up. All right, and is everyone seeing that okay?
Yes, yes.
Cool. All right. So again, nice to meet you all again. Joe Lofton. So I'm the current president and founder of our Male Educators of Color student organization. And our motto for MEXO, or MEXO for short, is our acronym. And our motto is learn, inspire, and educate. Oop. All right. So just a little personal experience just about myself and, how this all came into works. So just my personal experience being a student within the early childhood studies department. I've being one of the only males of color within that department. There's been this kind of sense of, me being the anomaly of the aspiring Black educator. And, I've been the only male in my classes, and more than that, I've been the only male of color in all my ECS classes except for one. And I can remember that one student's name. His name is Luis Barrios Ramos. He's also an aspiring educator like myself, and he's also a member of MEXO. So I can literally fit all the male students of color that I have gone to class with within my ECS classes. I can fit on my hand, and that's just two, me and Luis. And again, that's just the reality of the situation we're in. It's it says a lot, but it also says something, that there's a population on campus that, doesn't have a platform to express their concerns with the campus, with at larger situations. And, we really don't have a voice at all. So through this experience, being the only male educator, or being the only male student of color in my classes, I have become the unelected spokesperson for the Black community in my classes. It really puts me in two dynamic situations. It can play out one of two ways. One, I can assume the role of the angry Black man, being passionate about what I'm speaking my own personal truth, and trying to help broaden the horizons of my classmates. Or, I can sit back and say nothing and just, and I'm a believer of silence is violence, and saying nothing is, that's just not doing anything. That's doing no justice to anybody. And I've done both. I've assumed that role of being the passionate, I call it the passionate Black man, not the angry Black man, but that's the stereotype it falls into, what people say, like, shit, Joe's getting kind of crazy about the whole, we're just talking about the school to prison pipeline. But no, it's not just the school to prison pipeline. I've had friends who haven't made it out of, school, who had to drop out, and, who went to juvie and stuff like that. And to seeing where I was able to go to and seeing where they ended up, it's just more motivation for me to, continue the good work and continue to fight the good fight. And that's what I'm doing. And so with all this, kind of being the only male student of color, it kind of makes you feel like this walking into class every day. you think you have everything you need to get to where you are, to where you want to be. You know, you have the support, you have the books you need, you have the classes, the course requirements, but evidently it gives you this sense of feeling of like you're isolated on your own island, and that you have no one to help comfort you, to help you, you know, walk you through how to get through this, how to get through the feelings of, you know, feeling like this isn't for you. Because, you know, looking around, you don't see anyone that looks like you. It can only just imagine how that makes me feel and other students feel. It makes us feel insignificant, and it makes us feel vulnerable, isolated, and it makes us feel like we're stranded on our own little island. And the one thing that we're praying and hoping for is just to find someone that looks like us on that island. And, you know, and that's the whole goal of Mexo and what we're trying to do here, and dismantling these anomalies of, you know, the Black speech pathologist, the Latinx guidance counselor, the Asian language therapist, the Filipino dean of students, the Native American special education teacher, all of which should be realities for our students, not anomalies. And, you know, putting a system of support in place for these students, because there is none. And, you know, I needed someone to help tell me, like, Joe, you don't have to speak up for the Black, you don't have to keep talking about your own personal experience if you don't want to. Like, I didn't know that was a thing. Like, I thought this is my job to help not myself, but just to help my students and to help my classmates gain a little better insight to say, not all Black people speak, you know, a certain type of grammatical language, or like things like that. Not all Black people share the same experience regarding the school to prison pipeline. You know, we all see from where we stand. And that's what the whole message of what I was trying to convey. But at the same time, I didn't realize that I didn't always have to be that voice. And it was until my junior year that, you know, Dr. Estrada really put us in touch with MEC. And MEC is another cohort, which is our Male Educators of Color Network, which is our Sonoma State, or it's our bigger picture of not adults, but, you know, students who have gone past their, you know, graduate, who are current educators, teachers, administrators within our field. And that was the real sense, that was the first sense of, you know, belongingness that I felt throughout my entire years at Sonoma State. It was until my junior year that I actually felt that I belonged here, and that, you know, this fight was worth fighting for, because sometimes my passion, my strength, it wavered. And, you know, and like I said, you can get knocked down as many times as you want, but it's a lot easier to get back up when you have someone there. So, and that's what Mexo is designed to do. So real quick, I'll just read our mission statement. The Male Educators of Color Student Organization aims to support and serve males of color who aspire to work as education professionals throughout Sonoma County and the Bay Area. Mexo aims to enrich the experience for male students of color who are committed to social and educational justice and hope to positively impact their communities. Students in the organization will receive support from the SSU Male Educators of Color, or MEC. These students will be able to share their perspective on education, as well as learn from their experiences of former and current teachers and administrators. The purpose of this collaboration is to bring a sense of belonging and inclusion to undergraduate men of color while fostering their academic success and professional development. And that last sentence right there, that sums it right up. Like, just reading that every time, that just like kind of just perks me up a little bit, reminds me of, you know, why I got into this. And, you know, that's the sense of, you know, we're not just focusing on getting our students a degree. It's not just a degree, it's putting them on a trajectory, on a path for success, that not only they're allowed to, you know, explore post-grad opportunities, you know, but it puts them in a position to where they're able to identify their passion and where they want to explore it within the realm of education. They're not being catered to, you know, being force-fed. You have to be this teacher and you have to teach this and you have to teach there. I want our students, or the students in Mexo, to be informed, to realize, you know, that they have the power to choose to where they want to go. Like, they don't have to feed into, you know, being a teacher. You don't have to be always a teacher. Like I said, just dismantling those anomalies of the Latinx guidance counselor, the speech pathologist, you know, there's so many different avenues. And, you know, that's why we want to diversify our group. We're very inclusive in who we support, but within that, we're diverse. We're not just educators, we're counselors, we're therapists, we're a multitude of things. And that's the strength in us. We're inclusive, but yet we're diverse in our skill set and where we want to go after we graduate, hopefully. So real quick, I'll just go through some student benefits of being a part of the program, just building a community and network of men of color interested in education. Like, literally, that was probably like the biggest thing I needed, just to find some other people who were into the same thing that I was. and, receive up to 4 years of support while pursuing a bachelor's of arts, preferably in ECS. But, we understand, there's going to be music teachers, there's kinesiology majors who want to be PE teachers. So, we understand that, not everyone's going to be an ECS major. And we really just aim to support all undergraduate students, understand what it means to be an educator and the role you play in the lives of students, families, communities, develop as a professional within your field of study. Having all these questions answered about qualifications, salary, state assessments, like the CBET, CSET, like I didn't know about that until my sophomore year. And like, I got mollywopped by that my first time taking it. So I needed help with that. I didn't, no one told me how hard it was. So, but I'm getting through it now, so don't trip. Engage in dialogue through interactive workshops, webinars that contribute to your personal growth, development, and education throughout your college experience. And this receiving one-on-one support and guidance from your own personal mentor teacher. So that's the hope of having our volunteers from MEC be able to pair with somebody who's interested in a field that, one of our undergraduate students is, and to put them in contact with each other, to have someone to lean on in times of uncertainty, in times of, when you're wavering, because, it happens. We all get fatigued, we all get tired, and we all need someone to lean on sometimes. So that's the whole goal of this, because, I couldn't find someone to lean on until I found MEC, and Dr. E put us on that. And, that really helped give me the direction and the course of, where I wanted to create impact and change on campus. So the positive impact, by creating this organization, we'll be able to bridge the gap in which all students within our school are supported to the fullest extent possible within our ECS program. So like, again, we're putting that system of support in place for our students because it's not there. And, this is the first step. This isn't a permanent solution. This isn't a Band-Aid, but this is the first step to many more, to creating the world and the school that we want, not just for ourselves, but, for our future students. And with that, so what did I need your help with, just specifically regarding EduCorps, just performing outreach to each department, whoever that may be pertaining to you, a certain teacher, certain department head, and just recruiting potential students, and just basically asking yourself, who do I know that could benefit from being a part of this group? That's just the biggest takeaway of what I think that y'all can do for me. Just asking yourself that. And I know I also had some questions earlier about, is it just undergraduate students, graduate students? We're open to all students at all places where they are. We have graduate students in our organization right now. And I'm hoping that he puts on that he's going to be a mentor to our, undergraduates within our organization. And that's the hope of it. So it's not just undergraduate students, it's not just grad students. It's open to all students who are dedicated to, enriching the lives of all SSU students, but specifically our aspiring male educators of color on campus. And with that, that is my flyer. So again, I sent this to Dr. Stone. I think I sent it to all of you, actually. All of you have this. What am I saying? So, or most of you have it. I don't know if you have it. Wait, do I have it? Yeah. No, I can email this to you later too. If no one has it, I can just send it in the chain. And then that's pretty much it. So just thank you again for welcoming me here and just being able to share this space with you all. And again, if y'all have any questions of how you can support, or, like requirements to be part of the group, I'd be more than happy to outline that. I have a whole constitution and bylaws thing I can share with y'all too. So if you're interested in that. But with that, I'm gonna stop talking, and I'm gonna really just open this up to anyone and everyone, I guess.
Thank you so much, Joe. Yeah, this is really exciting. This is a much needed organization, right? Really great collaboration between undergrad students, graduate students, and also our faculty, right? And just really thinking about the isolation, right? Of men of color joining and being part of these educational pathways, right? And they are often lonely. And so I really appreciate, you developing this group. That mentoring component seems really, really key, to providing that kind of ongoing support. So yeah, I really am excited about it, and definitely encourage everyone watching, if it's something that fits your needs, if you know someone who it might fit theirs, to reach out and connect with Joe so that you can join. I just want to share a brief final thought. The potential of education is so much, and that's why sometimes in places it has been kept from people. So this is talking about culturally sustaining pedagogies, which can look many, many different ways. But these exist wherever education sustains the life ways of communities who have been and continue to be damaged and erased through schooling. I don't want us to think about our communities as damaged, but I want to think about the harm that does take place in schooling and the ways that we want to take part in educational spaces that work beyond harm. And sometimes, our work is harm reduction. It's kind of like reducing the harm, but even more, we want to support the life ways, to support the knowledges, to support the aspirations, to support the freedom dreams, to support the sovereignties, to support the languages and cultures of our students, right? Of the K through 12 students, their families, and the communities that we become part of when we become educators. So next week, we will have a critical education session that takes to heart one of the topics that was brought up today, the ways that classroom management at times looks a little bit like the school to prison pipeline, and how we can move from that to building classroom community, and how does that look differently when we think about ourselves as community, and that no one can be left behind, right? We want all of us, and we want to find ways to support us all so we can all be part of these beloved communities, as Reverend Dr. King has talked about. So I'm wishing you all an incredible rest of your day, rest of your weeks. Thank you so much for joining and for sharing and for being present in this space today. So thank you.
Thank you. It was nice meeting everyone.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jackie, for being here.
Pleasure meeting you all, and I hope to see you all again sometime soon. So
Yes.
Bye, everybody.
Likewise.
Great to see you, Joe and Jackie.